Picture this, a conference room somewhere inside the WNBA headquarters. Doors shut tight, no phones on the table. Faces that aren't just nervous, they're desperate. This wasn't a routine check-in about schedule logistics or quarterly projections. According to insiders, Commissioner Cathy Engelbert called every key figure in the organization into that room for one reason: because something was spiraling fast, and if nobody grabbed the wheel in the next few days, the entire narrative of women's basketball was going to crash in public, in real time, in front of the exact audience the league had spent decades trying to win over. And the trigger wasn't a failed drug test, it wasn't a legal scandal, it wasn't even a controversial trade. What forced everyone into that room was a statement coming from NBC. A statement that had the potential to completely restructure who holds power in the WNBA, who gets protected, who gets promoted, and who gets left behind. Whatever was said behind those closed doors didn't just affect this season. According to sources close to the situation, it permanently changed the sport. But to understand exactly why the commissioner was reportedly sweating, you first have to understand what NBC actually put on the table. This wasn't a broadcaster offering friendly suggestions to a business partner. This was a power move, clean, direct, and impossible to ignore. NBC and its media partners didn't pour billions of dollars into the WNBA because they fell in love with the game's history or its culture of collective sacrifice. They made that investment because they saw a specific opportunity, and that opportunity had a name and a jersey number. According to sources familiar with the negotiations, network executives had been watching the current season with a deeply conflicted energy, genuinely excited by the viewership numbers, but increasingly frustrated by what they were seeing on the management side. Their perspective, reportedly, was simple. When you write a check that size, you expect your primary asset to be showcased, not subtly undermined at every turn. Reports circulating within the league suggest NBC made it crystal clear that Caitlin Clark is not just a player they happen to like, she is the central pillar of their entire broadcasting strategy. The participation trophy marketing approach that the WNBA had leaned on for years, the idea that every player deserves equal promotional real estate regardless of who's actually driving ticket sales and TV ratings. NBC reportedly has zero interest in that model. What they want looks much more like what the NBA built around Michael Jordan in the late 80s. Simplify the narrative, elevate the star, protect the story. And according to reports, the message that came with the broadcast deal wasn't framed as a suggestion, it was framed as an ultimatum. Either the league gets its house in order and stops allowing internal politics to sabotage its most valuable commercial asset, or NBC steps in publicly and makes the rules themselves. For a league that has always prided itself on collective identity, that was a cold bucket of water straight to the face. And the people who pay for the charter flights get to decide where the plane lands. Now here's where things get genuinely complicated, because Cathy Engelbert isn't just dealing with an impatient broadcast partner. She's standing on a razor's edge between two groups who by this point actively resent each other. On one side, you have the NBC executives, the Amazon money, the Disney involvement, an entire constellation of corporate power that views Caitlin Clark as a harvest and the WNBA as a content farm waiting to be fully monetized. On the other side, you have a locker room full of athletes and a players' union that has built its entire identity around the belief that no single player is bigger than the league itself. According to rumors from people close to that meeting, Engelbert had to stand in front of the league's veteran core and deliver a message that nobody in that room wanted to hear. The surge in attention, the improved salaries, the charter flights, the increased sponsorship deals, none of it happened because the world suddenly woke up and recognized the collective brilliance of the WNBA. It happened because of a single lightning strike of popularity. And the people holding the lightning in a bottle are the ones with the cameras and the contracts. For women who spent a decade grinding for recognition, playing overseas in difficult conditions just to make ends meet, surviving on passion and pride, being told that a rookie is the reason their lives are finally getting better is not just uncomfortable, it's genuinely painful. The tension in that room, according to insiders, was thick enough to cut through. And Engelbert had to hold it together anyway, because the alternative was worse. To understand why this particular meeting reportedly crossed into emergency territory, you have to go back to the Olympic roster decision, because that's where many people believe the real fuse was lit. When the selection committee chose to leave the most talked about female athlete on the planet off the Olympic basketball roster, the reaction from the general public was loud. But the reaction from NBC, according to sources, was something else entirely. The network reportedly watched millions in potential advertising revenue evaporate overnight. The most watched women's basketball player in a generation, the athlete whose games were causing opposing teams to move venues to larger arenas just to meet demand, she wasn't going to be on the biggest stage in sports, and NBC had already built significant promotional infrastructure around the assumption that she would be. Insiders suggest this was the moment network executives stopped being patient partners and started being something closer to furious investors. The Olympic snub wasn't just seen as a basketball decision, it was seen as an act of institutional self-sabotage. Reports indicate that internal discussions at the network shifted significantly after that moment. The phrase "never again" reportedly came up more than once, and the emergency meeting at WNBA headquarters was, according to sources, at least partly a direct consequence of that fallout. There are rumors that the new media agreements being structured will include specific provisions designed to prevent future situations where internal league politics can cost the broadcast partner that kind of money. The business side is reportedly being given authority it has never had before over what would previously have been considered purely basketball decisions, and the coaches and general managers in that room had to sit there and listen to it. But the Olympic roster issue was only one piece of what was reportedly on the table. The other conversation, the one that sources describe as arguably the most explosive topic in the room, was officiating. Specifically, the pattern of physical play directed at Caitlin Clark and the league's apparent tolerance of it throughout the season. There's a theory that has been gaining serious traction not just among fans, but reportedly among sponsors and network executives as well, that the WNBA has been quietly allowing veterans to send a message to the new face of the game through physicality that would not be permitted in most other professional sports contexts. Welcome to the league, learn your place. The culture has a term for it, but to a network that just signed a landmark deal, that culture looks like product mismanagement. Think about what it means from a pure business standpoint. You have a player who is directly responsible for a measurable surge in ticket sales, merchandise revenue, and television ratings, and every time she drives to the basket, she gets hit in a way that the officials seem to be choosing not to call. That's not toughness, that's liability. According to reports, the mandate that came out of the emergency meeting on the officiating front was direct. The game needs to be cleaned up, fouls need to be called, and players who make a habit of targeting the league's most commercially valuable asset are going to face consequences that go beyond what the rulebook has traditionally enforced. The NBA spent years calibrating its officiating around protecting the players who drive its economic engine. Michael Jordan got that protection. LeBron James got that protection. Kobe Bryant got that protection. The WNBA has historically pushed back against that star-centric approach, treating it as contrary to the league's values. But NBC isn't paying for values, they're paying for highlights, and highlights require a healthy, available, thriving star player. There are rumors that significant changes to how games are called are coming, and that players who don't adapt to the new standard risk being fouled out or suspended at a rate that makes continuing the old habits professionally dangerous. And this is exactly where the locker room situation reportedly started getting volatile, because you have to understand what it feels like to be a WNBA veteran right now. These are women who built careers on sacrifice. They played in foreign leagues during the off-season, not because it was glamorous, but because the WNBA salary alone couldn't pay the bills. They fought for every inch of recognition the league has ever received. They showed up when the arenas were half empty and the cameras weren't rolling. And now, suddenly, the money is flowing, the attention is real, the living conditions are improving, and from where they're standing, one person is getting all the credit. The resentment that creates is not irrational, it's human, but it's also, from the network's perspective, a serious threat to the product. Rumors have been circulating that certain players have reportedly been quietly reaching out to journalists in an effort to plant narratives, stories about Caitlin Clark being overvalued, about her fan base being toxic, about the attention being disproportionate to her actual impact on the game. According to insiders, Engelbert had to address the very real possibility that this kind of quiet sabotage could escalate into something public and destructive. The concern reportedly wasn't just about individual comments on podcasts or social media. It was about whether a coordinated cultural resistance within the locker room could metastasize into a full-blown PR disaster, one that would cost the league not just goodwill, but actual dollars at a moment when the dollars are finally starting to flow in a serious way. The containment strategy that reportedly came out of the meeting wasn't subtle. Veterans were reportedly told in no uncertain terms that while they don't have to personally celebrate Caitlin Clark, they absolutely cannot publicly undermine the commercial product she represents. A corporate leash is being tightened around women who built their identities on being vocal, independent, and unbothered by authority. That is not going to sit easily with everyone. And if the players push back too hard, Engelbert faces a revolt that becomes a PR catastrophe. But if she doesn't push hard enough, NBC starts losing patience in a very public way. There is no clean path forward. There is only the least destructive option available. Now, here's the part of this story that reportedly sent a genuine chill through the veteran core of the league. And honestly, once you hear it, you understand why. According to sources, NBC has been developing a documentary-style series built around the WNBA, something designed to do for women's basketball what Drive to Survive did for Formula One, a behind-the-scenes, fly-on-the-wall production that pulls casual viewers deep into the world of the league and turns athletes into characters in an ongoing story. On the surface, that sounds like a dream for everyone involved. More exposure, more storytelling, more connection with new audiences. But there's a catch that the veterans reportedly understood immediately. In a production like that, the editors control the narrative. And if the cameras are following Caitlin Clark and the story is centered on her rise, then everyone else in the frame becomes a supporting character at best, an antagonist at worst. The veterans reportedly don't want to be the Washington Generals to Caitlin Clark's Harlem Globetrotters. They don't want to spend an entire documentary series being portrayed as the bitter, resistant, threatened old guard standing in the way of the league's evolution. They've spent careers building reputations and public images. The idea that a camera crew following a rookie could reframe their entire legacy in the eyes of a new, massive audience, that's not just uncomfortable, that's existential. Reports suggest the Players Association used the emergency meeting as a platform to voice serious concerns about this possibility. But here's the uncomfortable truth that the commissioner reportedly had to navigate. NBC knows exactly what it's doing. Conflict sells. Drama sells. The story of a league divided, of veterans and rookies clashing, of old culture colliding with new money, that's compelling television. The question of whether the veterans come across as sympathetic or villainous depends entirely on how the footage gets cut, and NBC doesn't answer to the players' union. The commissioner's job in that meeting was reportedly to convince the veterans that it is more financially advantageous to play the villain willingly with some level of control over how it's done than to be cast as the villain anyway with no say in the framing. That's an extraordinarily difficult sales pitch, and the fact that it was even necessary tells you everything about where the power in this league has shifted. Before we get to where this is all heading, there's a dimension of this situation that doesn't get talked about enough, and it goes directly to the economic reality that is quietly reshaping every decision being made at the league level right now. The WNBA's valuation has risen sharply. Franchise prices that would have seemed absurd a few years ago are now being discussed seriously by legitimate investors. The Indiana Fever are generating ticket revenue that by some measurements rivals the combined output of multiple other franchises. When the Fever travel to a city, the home team moves the game to a larger arena. That's not a normal sports story, that's a phenomenon. And the owners of every other franchise in the league are watching that phenomenon and making calculations.
Here's the tension. The general managers and coaches on the basketball side are evaluated on wins. Sometimes winning means deploying a defensive game plan that makes the product less exciting to watch. Sometimes it means resting key players during stretches of the season to manage workload. Sometimes it means making personnel decisions that are correct basketball choices, but terrible entertainment choices. The business side of the league, the owners, the commissioner, the broadcast partners, is now operating with a completely different set of priorities. According to insiders, the emergency meeting was at least partly an effort to formally close the gap between those two worldviews by force. Reports suggest that general managers received a message with real weight behind it. The league's media obligations are no longer a secondary concern that gets worked around basketball decisions. They are a primary factor that basketball decisions have to accommodate. If NBC wants Caitlin Clark in a primetime slot and she's healthy, she plays, full stop. The media contract is now limiting the autonomy of basketball operations in ways that have never happened before in this league's history. And the people making those basketball decisions had to sit across a table from the commissioner and hear that directly. Here's where all of this points when you extend it forward, and this is arguably the most significant part of what reportedly came out of the emergency meeting. The WNBA is not just changing its marketing strategy or its officiating standards, it is reportedly changing its entire identity at a structural level. Rule modifications are reportedly being discussed for the off-season. Shorter shot clocks, stricter foul enforcement, adjustments to defensive rules that would open up the floor and allow more high-scoring, visually exciting play. The purists will call it a corruption of the game. The accountants will call it protecting the investment. The realists will call it inevitable. Because a 60-55 defensive battle might be tactically beautiful, but it does not hold a casual viewer's attention on a Tuesday night when they have 40 other options on their streaming service. NBC wants 90-85. They want buzzer beaters. They want moments that end up on social media the next morning and pull new people into the ecosystem. The commissioner knows that if the product is boring, the money leaves, so she has to manufacture excitement, even when the sport's purist wing finds the manufacturing process distasteful. And the roster implications of those rule changes go deep. If the league recalibrates towards speed, shooting, and marketability, the big physical enforcers who built careers in the paint on defense and toughness are going to find themselves on the wrong side of a shifting metagame. Scouting reports change, recruiting priorities change. The type of athlete who thrives in this league changes. This isn't just about Caitlin Clark anymore. It's about what the WNBA is going to look like in 5 years and whether the women who built it recognize themselves in that version of the league. According to sources, general managers were reportedly encouraged to begin thinking about roster construction with these new priorities in mind. The old WNBA rewarded grit and defensive IQ. The new WNBA will reportedly reward pace, scoring touch, and the kind of visual excitement that makes for compelling broadcast content. And somewhere in all of this, there's Caitlin Clark herself, the person at the center of everything, the reason the meeting was called, the reason the money came, the reason the rules are changing, conducting herself with a composure that must cost her something. She's saying the right things publicly, praising teammates, deflecting individual attention, performing the role of a team player in a situation where the entire structural apparatus around her is being rebuilt to make her the center of the universe. The pressure on her is unlike almost anything we've seen in modern sports. If she gets injured, the plan collapses. If she underperforms, the narrative shifts overnight. If she handles it wrong publicly, the goodwill she's generated turns corrosive. NBC has placed an enormous weight on a person who is still in the early stages of her professional career, and everyone in that emergency meeting knew it.
The gathering wasn't ultimately about basketball rules or broadcast logistics or even internal league politics. It was a risk assessment. A recognition that the WNBA has built its entire future around a single point of potential failure, and a desperate, urgent conversation about how to build a fence around her before something goes wrong. What comes next will tell you everything about who actually won in that room. Watch how the games are officiated in the coming weeks. Watch the marketing language. Watch whether the veterans start showing up in NBC promotional content with their full personalities on display, or whether they're kept carefully in the background. Watch whether the physicality directed at the league's most watched player changes measurably. Those signals, playing out in real time on national television, will be the clearest picture you'll ever get of what happened behind those locked doors. The WNBA that existed before that meeting had a soul built on struggle, on collective sacrifice, on the idea that the team is everything and the individual is secondary. That version of the league reportedly walked into the conference room and didn't walk back out. What emerged instead is something more calculating, more commercially structured, and more powerful, but also more fragile, because it's built on the assumption that lightning keeps striking in the same place. The stockholders are running the league now. The players may control the court, but NBC controls the story. And in the modern sports entertainment economy, the story is everything. The camera is already aimed exactly where the money wants it. The only question left is whether everyone in the frame is willing to play their assigned role, or whether the resistance building behind closed doors eventually finds a way out into the open and changes the story in ways nobody in that room planned for. That's the real drama, and unlike anything being scripted in a boardroom, nobody knows yet how it ends. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the WNBA's transformation is going to save the league or strip away everything that made it worth saving in the first place? If you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next.